Now that we've taken care of that business, we can slip away for a well-deserved break,
said the doctor.
Don't you think we've earned that, K9?
Affirmative, Master,
answered the robot dog. The sounds of the time rotor rising and falling were masked momentarily by the sound of K9's wagging tail and twisting ears.
I thought we were on a tight schedule,
Romana called out from behind the interior door. The doctor puffed out his cheeks like an exasperated locomotive.
Do we have to adhere to a tight schedule? I mean, isn't the point of tight schedules to occasionally abandon them and enjoy the excess of free time you have acquired from the tightness of the schedule being tight?
Romana entered the console room with her head cocked with an air of moderate indulgence. It had become a familiar mannerism, even in this regeneration.
I'm not sure that's the point, Doctor. Time is such a sticky thing.
Without warning, the sounds of the TARDIS wound down to silence as the central column sank to its lowest position. The lights went out almost entirely. In contrast, the wall roundels remained illuminated by the light of a burnt orange dawn.
Tackier than a temporal twig,
shouted the doctor as he and Romana leapt to the console. After flicking familiar switches, then a few less familiar, the doctor looked up ashen-faced.
The only instrument on the console that has power is this flashing light.
What does that light mean?
Questioned Romana.
It means the power is out. And we were in full flight. We should have been thrown right through the vortex.
What on Gallifrey? No power? Then what's lighting the roundels?
The TARDIS is completely stopped. She isn't providing the light.
The doctor replied, bowing his head. Whispering, he continued.
It's coming from outside, a location between the interior and the shell of the real universe interface.
That's nonsense.
Romana furrowed her brow and shook her hair from her eyes.
Nothing can exist in an undefinable space.
The TARDIS exterior doors hummed open and blinding white light streaked in to bathe the doctor.
You simply must stop doing that,
groaned the doctor, but he did not seem to be addressing either Romana or K9. The Time Lord popped his lapels and did then turn his attention to his fellow Gallifreyan.
In case of difficulties, close the doors by any means and dematerialize.
How? There's no power.
Perhaps K9 can provide enough juice to at least close the doors.
The doctor speculated. Then he marched into the light, saying,
Time to meet the Piper.
Doctor, wait!
Romana cried, but he was already gone. She stopped where she was and sighed.
And it's pay the Piper.
Once through the doors, and his eyes had adjusted to the brilliance, the doctor found himself on a sandy plain under a rusty red sky. A man in glistening white stood before the doctor, looking into the setting sun. A white straw hat was perched on his head, and an ascot swathed his neck. A wineglass appeared in his hand, while a brandy snifter full of jelly babies materialized in the doctor's.
Doctor?
Came the salutation from the white-bearded man. Beyond him, sandstone mountains rolled into the distance. Resort villas and cabanas suddenly solidified nearby.
Guardian,
acknowledged the doctor, instantaneously and inexplicably finding himself standing next to the man.
Remarkably peaceful here. I like the mountains from the American Southwest. I can't say I miss the continental fog. Those mountains are oddly out of place with the Mediterranean villas, but at least it is peaceful.
Didn't you want a break from it all?
Taunted the Guardian.
I suppose that was the idea.
The doctor said reticently. He sniffed the fruity jelly babies with a wafting motion.
A fine vintage.
The doctor and the White Guardian now sat facing each other on solidifying white ironwork furniture. The doctor was surprised at how completely unsurprised he was at the shifting nature of this reality.
Where exactly are we?
The doctor asked, attempting to steer the conversation.
This old place. Just the centre of all realities, the temporal nexus itself.
The Guardian set his eyes on the doctor.
Are you tired of your adventures? Of your racing through the universe, righting wrongs and straightening crooked paths?
He took a swig of his illusory beverage through his white goatee.
No, I'm still quite a fan of the naturally crooked path. I like to think I put the orderly bend back in incorrectly straightened paths.
The doctor said, smiling.
Is it possible you could have become burdened by certain events in your future, Doctor? Events that will unfold due to actions committed long ago? Perhaps you are shirking a responsibility, dreading a consequence, maybe?
Leaving something undone? Remarkable. You're echoing the sentiment of my first self.
Sounds like a wise man.
Fear not, Guardian. I'm committed to resolving any issues which may arise.
A glass of cool water appeared in his hand, replacing the jelly babies.
Drink the water and be refreshed, Doctor,
said the White Guardian kindly.
How?
Began the doctor, but his voice gave out. He drank the water and cleared his throat with a short cough. Then he finished his thought.
How do I fulfill our obligations to time and space without hurting, even destroying innocence?
Now, isn't that always the trick? It's all in the nature of the doing and undoing. It's why you left your home planet, Gallifrey, in the first place. Besides, you and I both know you reap only what you have already sown, Doctor.
Ducking his head and nodding, the doctor realized he now stood at the console of the TARDIS.
What was that?
Demanded Romana, astonished.
Romana,
said the doctor, then paused. The TARDIS instruments had resumed their normal operations. The lighting returned to normal too. The elder Time Lord leaned on a railing, drumming his fingers.
we have to keep our schedule tight.
What, on vacation?
Romana asked, clearly confused on this second change of direction.
Tighter than before.
Growled the doctor to himself. He reached out to reset the coordinates, but then stopped in surprise. Unprompted, the engines roared once.
Ah, the settings have already been changed for us. How considerate.
He noted sourly. The TARDIS was underway.
Ah, not what I was expecting.
The doctor had emerged from the freshly rematerialized timeship. The TARDIS was surrounded by an outdoor cluster of noiseless retail buildings. He stepped out onto asphalt, which he swiped his finger across and promptly licked.
Earth, about 2170,
Let me guess. Not when we are supposed to be.
Came Romana's voice from the open door.
Don't be absurd.
Responded the doctor.
We are just where we're meant to be.
Romana poked her head out, bearing a wide grin.
And what's the name of this place?
She asked as she joined the doctor along with K9.
I wish I knew.
The doctor pondered as he eyed the surroundings. A man, a derelict in a black tattered skullcap and threadbare army surplus jacket, ran up to them speaking gibberish. He screeched to a stop upon seeing the TARDIS.
Hello?
The doctor said in polite inquiry.
She sees me! She's judging me!
The old hobo's long grey moustache and beard framed trembling lips. He ran for the nearest dumpster and threw himself inside, sobbing.
Odd. I tend to get on so well with the youthful.
Elderly.
Corrected Romana.
Elderly.
Responded the doctor.
Well, at least we aren't in an underground passage.
Romana sighed, trying to make the best of the situation.
Currently, mistress.
K9 noted primly. Shh, hissed the doctor with a wave. He pressed his fingers to his lips as he pivoted.
This is very wrong.
Romana looked at the suburban shopping centre. In the distance wound run-down riverfront properties, while further distant stood antiquated mining machinery intertwined with weeds. The ruins and occasional new constructions stood in stark contrast.
Very wrong.
Very, very wrong.
Oh, very, very wrong.
Romana laughed, crossing her arms.
Don't you think you're over-dramatizing this car park?
I never overdramatize.
The doctor replied gravely, then froze in his steps.
Midday, in front of a shopping centre. Not a car, not a housewife, nor even a depressed starling in sight. Very, very wrong.
The doctor cocked his head and wiped his nose with a finger.
And add to that a wrecked Dalek cruiser behind the TARDIS.
What?
Romana spun to gaze in horror at the vehicle filling the ground beyond the tattered blue police box. She trembled at the memory of her tortuous encounter with the Daleks on the first day of her secondary generation, when they interrogated her. She crouched, eyeing the windows and rooftops with extreme caution.
Where did that come from?
The doctor remained silent, apparently lost in thought.
It obviously crashed relatively recently.
Romana pointed out, hoping to coax more of a response.
What? Oh, of course it did. I might have been here when it did. That would make this London. They had really softened the Earth up with low-cost meteor strikes and solar weather manipulation.
The doctor said, his focus suddenly sharp and brought to bear on their current surroundings. He turned to K9.
We'll walk uphill a bit, K9. Stay and guard the TARDIS.
From the human hobo.
Said the metal dog.
Affirmative, Master.
Looks like the cruiser has been gutted by the human population.
Romana noted as they walked.
Even the hull has been stripped down. The real question is, where are the Daleks now?
Where are the people is the real question.
The doctor replied as they left the car park for still more run-down suburbia.
Did the Daleks somehow survive and kill everyone? If so, who built the structures newer than the crashed vessel? If the people destroyed our presumably surviving Daleks, where are they now?
Perhaps they've taken to a nocturnal life cycle and sleep during the day.
Ah, the hand of the Omega Man.
The doctor mused absently before responding more directly.
But then, where would they play football? Even in alien prisons, under the absolute worst conditions, humans will fight for a way to play football.
Then we should be frightened of a force capable of ending weekend football.
Romana warned.
Ha! No matter where the humans may hide, we can handle anything,
boasted the doctor, prompting Romana to roll her eyes.
We Time Lords defeated the Galactic Tin Cans. Besides, as I recall, the Daleks set themselves up for failure and were all disposed of. Industrious humans must have stripped all the ship's usable technology.
The doctor almost walked into a shimmering woman in white spandex, who was also walking along at a brisk pace. She subsequently passed by Romana, seeming oblivious to her.
Excuse me?
Romana ventured.
Do pardon us. We didn't see you approach.
Undeterred, the woman in white continued on, ignoring the Time Lords. She seemed almost to blur uphill faster than the eye could follow. The woman carved her way up the incline as if drawn along a familiar, repetitious trail by an unseen cord.
Well, that was certainly unexpected,
said Romana.
Yes,
answered the doctor, stepping almost shoulder to shoulder with her as they watched the woman dwindle in the distance.
She is scaling that peak above the wrecked ship,
said Romana, motioning toward a fog-shrouded facility sitting on the aforementioned peak of the hill.
Yes. That facility is likely built above the old mine. Looks like a power plant. They might have only just recovered nuclear power.
Was she real or an apparition? She was shimmering.
Oh, yes. Come on. Let's go.
Agreed the doctor. He started following in the invisible footsteps of the woman.
Must we follow that apparition past the Dalek death machine?
Romana complained.
I suspect it is most likely that following this person, flitting incorporeally around, will lead us to a highly illegal quantum tachyon accumulator.
The doctor pronounced.
A device for tracking Time Lords in space-time, designed to circumvent the matrix of Gallifrey. Are you mad?
Romana asked aghast, stopping in her tracks.
It's the death penalty if any are even found in possession of one.
Yet, this is the only planet in the universe we might find such a device.
I don't understand.
Imagine a human body, the slightly limited human brain, one heart. Not too bad once you get used to it. It's how I escaped detection from the time hunters myself, for a while anyway.
You? You're not human.
Not originally, no, and not now, but I was once. Briefly and temporarily, if you'll pardon the pun, I tried to drop out, sinking beneath Gallifrey's radars. The Time Lords objected to that. They were so angry they sent time hunters after me, Time Lords with no moral qualms about executing troublemakers. So, briefly, I made myself human, for all intents and purposes. Not the only time I've pulled off that trick, mind, albeit to evade different pursuers. I had to make special provisions to retain as much of my memory as possible. The time hunters eventually relented. I revealed myself to them, and in gratitude they undid my personal camouflage. Then they finally made good on my exile, my third self, trapped on the Earth in the 1970s, or 80s, never was sure. I feel I came off rather badly by being honest with them.
Romana caught up in an instant.
You used a Type 40 chameleon arch. Were you mad?
It's how I escaped into the Earth's past, or future. I sometimes find it hard to keep track. My memories, and indeed my whole physique, became somewhat limited, by my own choice.
The doctor held out his empty hand to an imaginary object.
To carry a hidden life in the palm of your hand. To open it at any time you want to return to the temporal nexus. Any time you want to go back to being a Time Lord. Just don't lose it.
An archfob. Yes, I have heard of them. Dangerous things. Where did you keep it?
In a cigar box in the TARDIS's old workshop,
said the doctor. He continued to lead the way up the path the ghostly figure had taken. By now she was long gone.
When I attempted to drop out, after the Time Lords passed sentence on my second incarnation, I fled here, but in the Earth's 50th century.
Doctor, does any of this have anything to do with the quantum tachyon accumulator?
That's just it. An aggressively dogged Time Lord, a hunter named Dante Lowe, arrived. He was searching for me, having employed an illegal Gallifreyan device, as you can guess, a quantum tachyon accumulator, to follow me through the temporal nexus. He was determined to carry out a terminal sentence. I barely got away. That was the first time I truly realized the danger of being a dropout. It just wasn't allowed. But then I realized it was also a death sentence.
Good heavens! That history was never repeated to me, even as president of the High Council. The Matrix also never indicated that these hunters ever existed. That must have been before my time. It certainly isn't like that anymore.
As far as you know. And your parents might well have been time tots back then. The Matrix was probably carefully revised, the truth adjusted.
And he didn't try to find you elsewhere?
I might have sent the hunter's TARDIS into orbit unmanned.
Then that's why the TARDIS brought us here. The Time Lords must have left him to die in this time period, his own TARDIS adrift. And it sensed the temporal flotsam and jetsam.
Very likely. For them it would neatly clean up an embarrassing mess. The secondary question is why bring us 2,800 years prior to my previous visit in that 50th century future?
Despite a growing breeze, the facility before them remained masked in fog. It was certainly taller than the doctor had previously imagined. As they negotiated a craggy rock outcropping, he offered a hand to Romana.
Mind the body.
Body?
Romana jerked at the sight of a mangled and unmistakably human male arm in the heather. Her initial revulsion passed, and her investigative nature took over.
What a violent end.
Yes. He was a soldier, judging from the remains of his uniform.
Do you think our apparition did this?
Using a stylus from a jacket pocket, Romana stabbed at the man's rifle. It had been sheared in two behind the magazine.
The non-corporeal shimmering individual wandering aimlessly over the countryside, so lightly that she doesn't even leave footprints. I don't see why not necessarily, although I'm no expert on apparitions. They're so shy.
Can you tell if there is an easier path? Perhaps we could catch up with her?
It appears not. Do you suppose her trek is repeated, on a loop?
She could take a daily walk up the mountains, or monthly.
Hard to say. Could be random, but I doubt it. Not in the presence of Gallifreyan time-tampering technology.
Freeze!
2 camouflaged uniformed men rose from the underbrush. They pointed antiquated machine guns at the Time Lords.
This zone is off limits. What are you doing here?
Romana calmly, if not habitually, raised her hands.
We were following the woman.
The armed men slackened their poses slightly, eyed each other, then returned to the travellers.
You'd better get inside with us.
A hum began to fill the air, followed by a growing tremor.
It started. Get a move on.
One soldier cried.
Captain Erickson requesting auxiliary entry with 2 captives.
Called the most decorated man into a throat mic.
Understood. Proceed.
Came the reply.
Move, you lot. We'll be killed out here.
The captain pointed to an opening doorway becoming visible above the rocks. The party made for the entrance, fighting to stay upright during the tremors.
It's reinforced. You'll be safe in there.
Erickson reassured them. Once inside, the doctor and Romana were ushered into an interrogation room, then bound to chairs. And light shone in their eyes. Captain Erickson stepped from behind the lights.
Now, who are you?
He snapped.
He's the doctor and I'm Romana. And this is all quite unnecessary.
Doctor and Romana.
A private said, walking into the room and scribbling down their answers.
You would be his...
Companion.
Barked Romana, then primly added,
And equal.
The 2 men raised their eyebrows at each other in misogynistic camaraderie.
We are travellers who found your site by mistake,
The doctor offered. Captain Erickson sparked a taser into the doctor's armpit.
Stop that!
Getting to you there, Doc.
Hardly. It's just my other arm is feeling left out.
Daily tea, Captain.
Piped up yet another private, entering with a tray of steaming drinks.
All ready, Private Davies? Did you bring enough for our prisoners?
Erickson asked, indicating to the doctor and Romana, still bound to their chairs.
Aye, sir. We ain't uncivilised, you know.
Tea, Doctor?
Asked the captain.
Tea.
The doctor murmured, bewildered, as he watched a small table placed before them. He shook his head like a Labrador coming off a sugar high.
Let's see. T as a distribution of the sample mean minus the population mean over the standard deviation over the square of ginger root. Do you care for ginger root tea, Romana?
Oh, no, very kind of you, but, as you know, I am a bit of a purist when it comes to tea or infusions.
British tea, I assure you. At the moment we are limited to breakfast tea. Supply lines have been down.
Due to the creature? Or perhaps the girl?
Quite. Strikes invisibly. All we ever find are its victims. Forgive my manners. Lost track of the time. Procedure, you know. Please loosen their bonds for tea.
Oh, I completely understand,
said the doctor, as he was rocked roughly by the meaty-handed private removing his bonds.
One so rarely gets to enjoy a rousing interrogation when schedules are at play, eh?
Romana cocked her head with a realization.
Points of procedure are quite important following the Dalek incursion, aren't they?
It's civilization,
replied the captain, as he drew a chair to the table to sit comfortably for tea.
Procedure, manners, you know. Wheels of progress and all that. Rediscovering lost knowledge, principles, structure.
Sounds daunting. It's only been a few years since the battle with the Daleks, and I've seen it all before. You lot are doing exceedingly well. Rebuilding, reclaiming the old mine.
Quite. We had to start anew on more stable ground, but progress is being made. Then, when we first started up the machinery, the creature appeared.
You realize we have nothing to do with this creature, yes?
I'm inclined to believe you, miss, although I must say my inclinations don't mean anything.
We found a body outside, with injuries that were in places ragged and in others clean.
Oh no! It got Ian!
Those injuries were either caused by a giant foot wielding a sword of Damocles, neither subtle nor hard to track, or a time shelf.
A what?
Think of a distortion field, gentlemen. A deadly concentration of energy that can cut through any substance.
A random invisible distortion in time itself.
Imagine a moving, undetectable, walk-in ripsaw.
The doctor suggested helpfully. Ericsson's eyes darted first to Romana and then to the doctor.
What if this time shelf thing randomly struck underground?
Earthquakes, weather disruptions, static electricity discharges.
Radio outages, utility outages. You very likely would have evacuated the populace.
The doctor drifted off as connections were made. Romana and the doctor shared a look.
Perhaps we can help resolve your problem and ours simultaneously.
Your problem?
Oh, it's an interesting case. We've been tracking the emanations of a device of foreign technology. We arrived here, but the trail had gone cold. We initially suspected it was in the Dalek hulk, but now I suspect it is somehow connected to the apparition of the Lady in White, and possibly this creature to boot.
I do say that's a cracking jolly notion. We might be on the first steps to a solution. How do we proceed?
The captain said excitedly. The doctor murmured, then absconded with a pad and pencil.
Measurements and procedures, Captain.
He cried, spinning to face the officer.
Procedure and all that.
The doctor then scrawled a disk with a cone in the pad.
To start with, we have normal time.
He drew a line bisecting the intersection.
Imagine that line coming out of the page towards our faces.
He drew a column intersecting the disk and cone.
Then we have the known temporal nexus. The matrix relates to it over here somewhere. The dotted lines, perhaps. If a known localized tachyon field were introduced...
This cone becomes like a donut then, doesn't it?
The captain supplied. The doctor and Romana were shocked, their mouths hanging agape.
Or at least a half bagel over here, near your time arrow.
The captain added.
How on Gallifrey?
Romana began.
Bless you, Brigadier,
exclaimed the doctor, forgetting himself, his location, and everyone in it.
Captain,
pointed out Captain Ericsson.
Bless you anyway, my dear man,
the doctor enthused, recovering his senses.
I had no idea you grasped basic temporal mechanics. You explained it so simply, your mastery may exceed my own, or at least Romana's.
This final remark earned the doctor a growl and a sharp boot from his companion.
My dear Doctor, I've seen this broken infinity graphic every day since Dr. Tyndall initiated Power Up.
Can you show us?
Ericsson was more than happy to oblige. He took the two Time Lords to a lift. In that elevator, the doctor confided to Romana,
I am almost certain this Dr. Tyndall will turn out to be Dante Lowe, the time hunter from Gallifrey.
Really? I too concluded the accumulator must be here, gathering geothermic or tectonic potential, while simultaneously expelling accumulated power as exhaust. However, would a time hunter come back in time to pursue you at this place in time and space? If he could do that, surely he would go back to the Dalek incursion itself, in 2164.
I agree. And no, it doesn't make sense, but be ready. This man is a killer.
The doctor and Romana took deep breaths as the lift doors opened to reveal an open-plan control room. A number of white plastic-clad technicians, men and women, stood holding clipboard devices at the periphery of the room, observing their respective stations. A few made distracted glances to the newcomers. In the middle of the bay, an unusual column of dimly lit electrics and what could have been organic-looking skin rose to a rounded point. Romana was impressed, if a little horrified.
It certainly looks like they've reverse-engineered some antiquated Scarran technology.
Via a hollow projection appeared the familiar disc and cone, arcing partway into a recognizable infinity loop.
Weather status?
Came an unseen voice.
Above seasonal average activity.
Another technician answered. The first voice asked,
Volcanic projection? Continuous.
Answered yet another technician on the far side.
Captain Ericsson?
The first voice called.
Dr. Tyndall, I brought you two strangers we found at the western border. They propose to help resolve the issues with the systems.
Really?
Get ready. If necessary, we'll take the soldiers' weapons.
I would like to meet them.
A woman, that same first voice, said from beyond the semi-electronic mountain in the middle of the room. She walked around it into view and stood facing them. She wore the same plastic lab clothing as the others manning the control room.
I am Dr. Tyndall, Chief Operator of this facility.
Dante Low indeed.
Romana chided, nudging the doctor.
Greetings. Please ignore my assistant, Dr. Tyndall. Her name is Romana. Let me introduce myself,
said the doctor, grinning with teeth fully on display.
I am the doctor.
Dr. Tyndall froze.
Not the doctor? The genuine article?
You were expecting us?
Romana asked incredulously. Astonished, Dr. Tyndall said,
Many have heard of the Doctor from the time of the Dalek incursion. We have begun to regard him as a folk hero, a myth even. But here you are, in the flesh. I thought he would be older,
said a nearby technician before she caught herself and looked to the floor, blushing.
Well,
smiled the Time Lord of indeterminate years.
I age well. Could I examine your setup?
With Dr. Tyndall's permission, the Doctor and Romana examined the by now familiar holoprojection, as well as the other not-so-familiar charts.
These emanations, what are you trying to do at this facility?
Following the mine's explosion at the end of the invasion and our new one freedom, we set out to utilize the excavations for a number of natural resources. Many of the old shafts still survived, apart from the main core one, of course. After reopening the mine, our instruments began to detect tectonic instability.
Could it potentially be new volcanic activity, new geothermal instability as a delayed after effect of the alien bomb?
Romana wondered.
We lowered a prototype direct power conversion unit into the mine as far as it could go anyway. You'll be happy to know we have nearly total conversion.
Dr. Tyndall proclaimed proudly, seeming not to hear her.
What?
Gasped the doctor, the blood draining from his face.
You aren't using a water turbine, are you?
No. We repurposed alien devices to act as raw energy capacitors.
And output electricity?
That would appear to make sense.
The doctor added with mounting dread.
That's the principle.
Where does the device send the other energies it accumulates?
What other energies?
A capacitor stores power and releases it as required, or at least as designed. I'm betting this machine of yours accumulates many forms of power and probably discharges them at capacity. All of them.
These last words uttered by the doctor held deadly significance.
No, there must be another explanation.
What confounded arrogance! Your device isn't responsible for the destructive forces unleashed, not that it was ever really your device in the first place. But there is a component or some element nearby that is certainly being influenced by it, acting as a magnifying lens, and using your apparatus to spew out, among other things, ions, charging the atmosphere. Probably responsible for the sheet lightning and other unusual emanations worldwide.
A violent tremor rocked the building. White-purple lightning turned the windows to blinding rectangles of fury. Dr. Tyndall still appeared willing to argue when an aftershock shook the mountain.
The increasing tremors?
She asked in subdued tones.
Aren't coming from the planet,
finished Romana. She pointed to a panel being operated by a young technician.
At least not just the planet. The increasing tectonic activity is likely from undetected random discharges from this.
The holoprojection switched to an image of a machine hanging by a metal stem in the mine shaft. It boasted a plainly visible emblem, concentric circles, a misshapen pentagon, circular missing discs, and a couple of variously sized adjacent discs.
Gallifrey,
whispered Romana in confirmation.
Yes,
the doctor replied, staring into the middle distance. He unconsciously twitched his sonic screwdriver from finger to finger.
The converter itself is responsible for these sporadic tectonic disturbances?
Dr. Tyndall asked with mounting dread.
I can just turn it off,
she then announced desperately.
Gallifreyan technology isn't that simple. It often has a mind of its own.
It's too dangerous to service, of course. Too much radiation.
The room shook harder. Cracks appeared in the ceiling and walls.
I'll need an environment suit.
He stated determinedly, tinged with a little reluctance.
You know about this Gallifrey machine? Can it be safely deactivated?
Yes, no, and I'm going to anyway.
Oh God, we caused the harm we were trying to suppress.
Dr. Tyndall gasped in defeat. She hunched over, clutching her chest.
What a sick, twisted joke.
An environment suit that looked like it was made from a large space blanket was brought to the doctor. He began to suspect that in these impoverished post-war times it might have actually been repurposed from one. Nevertheless, he started donning it immediately.
Look at the accumulator's exhaust,
Added the doctor.
or more precisely, the apparent lack thereof. Remember your basic physics. In the end, your misuse of this machinery, its undirected outpouring of deadly yet undetected energies, is killing your own people here while creating desert and famine further afield, probably.
Those oscillations must be responsible for causing worldwide earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, and possibly worse.
Romana added.
We need to shut it off, now.
Another jolt hit the foundations, knocking everyone to the floor. The doctor looked out of a window to see lava spewing from a doorway in a lower corridor.
Are we, perchance, sitting on a volcanic fault?
The doctor mused sarcastically.
Unbelievable.
Romana sighed with a roll of her eyes.
Is the collector off?
Tyndall asked.
Yes, but the emitters are still charging. I don't know where their energy is coming from.
Volcano Day. The machine is getting its additional charge from time itself, as it was designed to do.
Creating a tectonic resonance. How much worse can this thing get?
Oh, trust me, it will get much, much worse, Romana. Get everyone out of here. I have to reach the accumulator and snuff the whole thing out.
The doctor zipped his padded suit shut and tossed its gloves into the helmet.
Technician, can you get me to the alien device?
We are with you as far as we can go.
Captain Erickson said, while his men, ever prepared, hoisted rolls of cable to assist the doctor.
Quick, everyone out the side entrance.
Romana barked. She followed those running humans, not staying to aid the doctor. A boulder dropped through the wall ahead of them, flattening a poor woman to death. Romana turned her head, sickened. Then, in a moment, she was back on task.
The rear door then, hurry.
They ran to the loading dock. The first man to leap from the steps was consumed by an exploding fountain of fire. His yell was barely heard as he was incinerated. Romana forced the panic-stricken scientists and technicians back the way they came.
We'll find another way.
Romana yelled over the increasing din. The doctor's party stood in an access hatch outside the main mine shaft.
We'll stay as long as you're in there.
Captain Erickson told him grimly. His men stood at the shaft entrance, coiling out cable as the doctor tucked his sleeves into his gloves.
Besides, I don't think there is another way out. The mine elevator isn't safe during these tremors.
The technician piped up nervously.
Yes, I have had some experiences in unstable mines before.
The doctor said, a little impatiently.
Plenty of light in there. I'm afraid it must be a lava flow.
What temperature is the cordage good for?
Offhand, I have no idea. Just keep it out of the flames.
The doctor shot furious eyebrows at the captain as the technician opened the shaft. He pulled his hood on while the soldiers secured the cable to the doctor's built-in harness. Descending into the shaft, the doctor found thick, heavy soot and gas illuminated eerily from beneath. He ran his palm along one gantry leg to another, easing his way down. Worryingly, stones fell free from the wall as his hands brushed them. He called into his suit mic.
Captain, we need to go faster. The shaft is breaking down.
Aye, Doctor, came the staticky reply. Consequently, the doctor's descent became far more rapid. The heat grew steadily, but as yet at a moderate rate of climb. Nevertheless, even through the protection of the suit, the doctor's face broke into a sweat. The Time Lord covered his visor instinctively when a flash of burning gas rushed past him. His environment suit was quite fireproof, he reasoned reassuringly. Corrosive gas and static electricity notwithstanding, his memory unhelpfully added. He navigated a cross gantry that anchored the accumulator stem to the middle of the shaft. Stones periodically fell around him, fortunately diverted for now by the gantry above. The doctor anxiously wrapped his arms around the heat-proof metal stem. He looked into eyes staring back into his own. The unnatural, transparent apparition hovered before him. She was surrounded by a wispy bluish halo and kept pace with the doctor as he was lowered. She looked at him and gave an almost apologetic smile.
Oh, please pardon me.
The doctor declared magnanimously. He then switched over to the external speaker.
I'm just here for the view.
What was that, Doctor?
Erickson spoke into his ear.
I'm not alone down here. The young lady we were discussing has joined me. She seems aware of me.
Are you hallucinating, Doctor?
That would make things so much easier.
What's that, Doctor? The QRM is getting bad.
Interference from the static down here.
Scalding water rushed over him, followed by waves of flashing burning gas.
The accumulator is in sight. Slow down.
The doctor rasped into his mic, his breathing now pained with the increasing heat and fumes. He gripped the gantry and the rope tightly now. He stared at a shiny metal decahedron with rings of stainless steel, complete with tungsten actuators radiating outwards. He snared one of these rings and tied onto it with his other hand. The whole device shimmered with arcs and glows as it accumulated sorted and sifted energy. The doctor assumed it must be capturing random tachyons for later release. He unscrewed the bolts holding the accumulator and let it fall the length of the line he had attached.
Listen,
The doctor said to the apparition.
if you're real, I don't dare close down the device while you're here. You should go to a safe place in case you become solid.
The young woman smiled calmly but remained silent.
Very well. Captain, can you bring me up?
A moment passed.
Captain?
The apparition caught a falling burning line. As far as the line was concerned, she was solid enough already.
Ah, the cable has broken. A small error of judgment on my part.
The young woman shrugged. This was when the doctor realized she was holding his hand.
Well, aren't you kind?
The doctor looked around as the flames rose.
Should we just hang around?
The woman shook her head and pulled his hand unwillingly from the support stem. She turned in space and took the doctor in an embrace, which he returned. He was amazed and relieved how solid her form felt as she carried him up the shaft.
You're becoming real!
Cried the doctor as the heat began to overcome him.
Must be the proximity to the device.
They passed gantry after gantry. She placed her cheek against the doctor's helmeted one.
I understand. Wherever we go together.
The doctor's eyes fluttered. He seemed lost in an eternity of flashing lights behind his eyelids.
Doctor!
Erickson shouted through the opening of the shaft. As he caught sight of the ghostly young woman, he added,
Stand back, men!
Semi-conscious, the doctor collapsed gasping on the floor outside the shaft. The tremors were continuing. He was groggy and uncertain, but pulled the accumulator into the corridor using the attached line. Immediately, he blasted it with various harsh sonic screwdriver settings. Whirs and clicks came from the machine, which finally grew dark, then silent. The doctor pulled off his hood and realized he was still in the embrace of the young woman. She solidified and took a breath.
I'm alive!
She exclaimed.
Yes, my dear, we both are. Is there a medic? This old doctor needs fluids. And the ghost has just experienced a sudden unexpected weight gain.
A man used that machine on me.
She said softly, nodding towards the now dead accumulator. Odd tones of shame had coloured her words.
I was trying to help him. Something went wrong. It cast me into the past. I've been trapped in my own yesterday ever since. For decades. Oh, sir, I have been lost in the hills and fields for so many years. I've never felt so...
Hopeless?
Offered a bleary-eyed and shattered doctor.
unwanted.
Concluded the girl. The doctor angrily threw the dumpster lid open. The man inside cowered in the unwelcome light. The doctor plucked the hobo from within and seethed at him.
Dante Lowe, you've been here all along, you pathetic weasel. Do you know what you almost did to me, and to your own?
The doctor nudged the man.
Foot's on the other neck now, eh?
Dante Lowe stumbled away, breaking free of the doctor.
She's judging me!
Romana grasped the man in a half-Nelson and pinned his wrist against his back. She regarded the tortured time hunter for a moment.
He's clearly from Gallifrey. I didn't recognize the ruined uniform before, though. It and he are in a shocking state.
She pronounced with a tut and a theatrical shaking of the head.
So the High Council left you to die in your own past? I know they would not think highly of the lack of care given to your uniform. How sad.
The centuries of torment. I could simply let you die. Perhaps even help you on your way. No one would object. My hands would be clean.
But you're the doctor! You don't kill!
You must have missed the Time War,
Romana observed. Lowe sobbed.
I'm sorry! Please, someone help me!
As he said this, he clutched Romana's arm, still holding him tight.
When I failed in the future, I tried to use the tachyon accumulator to discharge time energy and project us to another period, one when you were known to arrive on Earth. I was propelled back in time with my poor naive assistant, but the misuse of the machine...
It was only meant for doing harm.
Yes, that's all it can do. Oh, the consequences. My assistant has been trapped in a time loop, neither dead or alive. It's a living death for us both.
I'll give you a choice. Stay here in this alien world, never return to Gallifrey, and live out your life, all your remaining regenerations. Alternatively, I will send someone from Gallifrey to pick you up. I'm sure they'll be friendly. Either way, you'll never set foot in my TARDIS.
I can't say which derelict life is worse, here in the trash heap between Earth's histories, or to live out your days in the wastelands of Gallifrey.
By the way, I freed your assistant. Naive no more, I'll warrant, from the time loop you initiated. For her sake, understand? I will send someone to rescue you both, I suppose, eventually.
Romana released Lowe and let him see his assistant, who had until now stood silently behind him.
Terminella!
Sobbed the shaking man. Terminella took his hand with some reservation.
Come, Romana,
said the doctor, not turning his head to watch the reunion. The doctor picked up the quantum tachyon accumulator and walked toward the TARDIS. K9 was standing guard.
Hello, K9.
Master?
K9 responded crisply. Romana caught up and took him by the elbow.
Are you okay?
I don't know. The girl told me Lowe had accidentally used the accumulator, having no idea it had the power to throw people out of time sync. Neither did I, mind you. She said she wandered the hills and fields aimlessly, for decades, an abandoned Gallifreyan assistant. She said she had never felt so unwanted.
A moment passed between them. The doctor opened the door.
Let's put this Time Lord tracker into storage,
he pronounced firmly.
Won't there be consequences for that?
Romana suggested. The doctor's face creased in an all too familiar frown. He sighed in resignation.
Only if we're caught. We'll cross that bridge if and when we come to it.
Masters, mistresses, the Doctor requires materials in order to maintain the TARDIS and ensure continued functionality. He similarly requires carbon-based comestibles to sustain his own biological functions and existence. Master would never say this, but he requires aid beyond that supplied by this unit in order to acquire these. To aid the Doctor in his various tasks and creations, this can be most effectively achieved via Patreon or Substack subscriptions, or through donations directly to PayPal. Or if you desire physical goods in return for your contributions, written accounts of my travels with the Doctor are also available on Amazon. Links are in the description below. Thank you, Masters, mistresses.